Hello, everyone. Welcome to the City Council meeting for Tuesday, June the 4th. Ms. Hilbert, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilman Kidder?
Present.
Councilwoman Butler?
Present.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Young?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor Crocker.
Here. Will you please join me in the pledges and a moment of silence? Honor the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Again, welcome everyone. We will move right into item B1, which is announcements and reminders. Mr. Garza, how are you this evening?
I'm great, thank you.
Good.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I do have just one announcement. On behalf of the Victoria Police Department, we'd like to remind the public that they'll be holding Camp Kimrin on June 24th through the 27th in memory of Kimrin Lee, who dreamed of becoming a police officer. Children ages 10 through 14 will be able to learn about police work through demonstration and hands-on activities. Application forms can be downloaded at victoriatx.gov/police or picked up at VPD substation in the Victoria Mall. Completed application forms and fees must be turned in by June 10th at the mall location. For more information, contact the VPD training unit at 361-485-3799 or police training at victoriatx.gov.
Very
And
good.
surprisingly, that's all I have.
That is somewhat
tonight.
surprising, yes. So then we'll move to B2, which is public and employee recognitions.
All right, so I do have one employee recognition before we get to the public one. I had something else. But I'd like to ask our Assistant City Attorney Ruby Boone to stand up for a second because she was recently appointed to the Texas Young Lawyers Association Small City at Large position on the TYLA Board of Directors. TYLA is the public service arm of the State Bar of Texas and assists the State Bar in facilitating the administration of justice, fostering respect for rule of the law, and most prominently advancing the role of lawyers in serving the public. And so this obviously just speaks to, again, our employees' continuation of professional development and continue to serve the greater good through involvements in the associations and otherwise. And so Ruby, thank you so much for representing us well in that effort. Speech, yeah. You're an attorney, speech. That's all on my end. And I guess I'm happy to introduce the next topic.
You got it. Roll with
All
it.
right, so I'll ask Christy Euchre to come up to help introduce, I'm sure, a board member who will talk about the Keep Victoria Beautiful June Business Beautification Award.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before I do that, I do want to make a point to remind the community to nominate a business that's doing a beautiful job taking care of their property. We have been doing this for several years now, honoring local businesses who go the extra mile, and there's lots of them out there. And as a reminder, it doesn't have to be anything huge. It can just be potted plants and a nice paint job and the gamut of what makes a business just appealing to those in Victoria. So you can go to our website. You can also give us a call at 485-3230 if you want to nominate a business. And now I will introduce Meredith Bird, our board chair, to announce our winner.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
It's nice to see you guys. So on behalf of the KVB board, I am delighted to present June's Beautification Award to New First National Bank. This is a huge property at the corner of Main and Zach Lentz. New First has been a part of our community since 2005. They built this location in 2008 and expanded in 2014. And it's a big property and it always looks immaculate. It's always really, really well kept. the mowing, the landscaping. They've got these gorgeous, colorful potted plants that are lining the front of the building. It is really one of, it's always putting its best face forward, and it's certainly deserving of this award. And so tonight, help me congratulate New First National Bank.
Well, thank y'all. I'm Neil Stevenson with New First National Bank. With me is our Business Development Officer, Sheila Vesley. As Meredith said, we've been here since 2005. Our branch was started by the late Randall Lau. We moved to our current location in 2007. I'm sorry, 2008. Yeah. We've always thought that we had a beautiful building and a pretty location, and are appreciative that somebody else thinks so as well. So we couldn't do it without the help that we get from the Ponchik family with Home and Yard Graphics that does our landscaping, and John Fassetti with Four Seasons Nursery that does our potted plants. They are always on top of things and make things look really good and keep it beautiful. So anyway, we certainly appreciate the recognition. Thank you all very much.
Congratulations, well deserved. Mr. Garza, any other public and employee recognitions?
No, sir.
Okay, then we will move then to item B3, which is items from council. Does anybody have anything this evening?
I have something
Ms.
that perhaps we can talk about at some point in the future, but I have a citizen that has called me or contacted me. Apparently, their neighbor has now a rooster, used to have chickens, and does have chickens, and I know that a lot of us have dealt with the chickens in the ordinance, but a rooster sort of is a different situation. She's getting quite a bit of noise from it. So she pointed out that some cities don't allow roosters. I didn't really know that, had never thought about it, but it's something that I'll look into a little bit more, and just thought I'd mention it for us and also for the community to be good citizens and good neighbors.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, well then we will move on from B3 and we'll move into citizen communications. I have a few cards and we'll start with Miss Jenny Stafford. Welcome, Ms. Stafford.
So much. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm here to tell you, I want you to understand the impact that the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, has had on Midcoast and on our community as large. And I hate to give you a history lesson, but here I go anyway. Back when I first became CEO at Midcoast, we realized that our shelter, our domestic violence shelter, was worn out. We'd completely worn out. It's an old house on Depot Street. I'm getting a few head nods here if you've seen it before. The electricity, the plumbing, everything was shot. And we created a committee to start raising money, and I'd never done it before. And Robert Loeb took me by the hand and said, "Let me tell you something. There's money out there. We just got to find it." And at that point in time, CDBG had not been used in the way it is used now. And he and I visited almost every single city council member. And I wanted to read you the list, which was Denise Rangel, Gabe Solis, Paul Polasic, David Hogan, Joe Truman, Tom Halapaska, where we had a few cookies, and also Mayor Will Armstrong at the time. And we told them of our idea of building a shelter and using CDBG money, and we got absolutely no pushback. There was agreement in doing that. We were able to use some other donated funds to buy the property, and then CDBG was like our seed money, and we were able to build the facility at a cost of around $2 million. Immediately after we moved in, we realized that we were underbuilt, And so we started another building project, thank you CDBG, and added a wing of offices that provided housing case management, legal advocacy, crisis counseling, children's services. And again, we underbuilt. And so when I took it back to the board again, they said, whatever you do, build a building twice as big as you think you're going to need it. So we built an additional wing for children's services so we could do parenting and have children's activities and have, we can't call it daycare, we call it shelter care. But we could not have done all that without the CDBG money. And so I want you to understand how important that is, not just to us, but to the people we serve. And here I am with my hand out again because we have another project looming before us. And you've graciously granted us money in the past, and we need a little more to get us over the hump to do our resource center, where we'll provide showers and lockers and ability to hold mail for folks that are living on the street, as well as doing some other things for kids in the community. Before I sit down, my time is up. I got to tell you that not every community is like Victoria. I'm on several different listservs, and there are many people like me who don't get along very well with their city leaders and with city planning. And y'all have got the best when it comes to city planning. If I need a letter signed, if I need a copy of something, they are always agreeable, and I feel like they're truly our partners in the work we're doing to serve a vulnerable community. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stafford. Next is Michael Vonderoy. Welcome, Mr. Vonderoy.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Michael Vondro. I live at 2204 East North Street. We have people living at the car wash at the by the Salvation Army on New AC Street. And is there any way, like, someone from the Salvation Army could help them get shelter or Midcoast, or at least give them some water? I mean, I don't care anymore. I don't use that car wash anymore, you know, but people shouldn't be so desperate where they have to live at a car wash. And I noticed that today, you know, it's been a come and go thing. And I just wish someone could help them, because, you know, it's not even fair to the owner that owns the business, because who's going to use his business, you know? But I do wish someone could go up there and talk to them, maybe a Midcoast person or someone from the Salvation Army. This has been going on for a while. And also want to thank code enforcement for cleaning up around Christ Kitchen and Queen City Park. There's just lots of filth and squalor everywhere. There's furniture, tires. There's people that dump their furniture right by the dumpster at Christ Kitchen, and there's people living in tents. They did get rid of those. If the people would have just picked up after themselves, they could probably still be living in the tent. But I wish someone could follow up and take care of it. I'd give code enforcement an A+ on their effort. They've been writing people up and stuff, but some people just like to live in filth and squalor, and they're not going to change. When I was in the Navy, people wouldn't flush the toilet or wash their hands, and they had to have head watches to make sure people flushed the toilet, you know, and washed their hands. And I even once had a lieutenant commander that didn't want to flush her, and I chewed him out. I was just an E1, and I said, that's my job, and I made him wash his hands and stuff, but it shouldn't come to that. But some people like living like that, and they're not going to change no matter what. But I would like someone to take a look at the car wash and, you know, talk to some of the people that's living there. And, you know, right now it's in the 90s and it's real hot, and I feel bad for them. But thanks, and have a good evening. Oh, one more thing. I don't think when people kill 11 dogs, they should get 8 years probation and deferred adjudication. That's what they're doing right now. If you kill pets, you automatically get probation. And we had a daycare center for dogs, and it was just a killing machine. All they did was kill the dogs and stuff. I wish they could be more strict on prosecutions. Thanks, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vonderoy. And my last card is Mr. Harley Fisk. Welcome, Mr. Fisk.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and any interested citizens. Over the weekend, I had a number of guitars playing at my house. Their music was beautiful, more beautiful than if any of them had played alone. Last night, I attended a performance that was broken into parts. It began with countertenor Sam Higgins and was followed by oboist Bobby Harris. Each of them was wonderful to hear, but it was when they performed together that we got to experience the true beauty of their work. This week, as part of Bachfest, there'll be a number of performances by various musical artists, often in groups of 3 or 4. They will perform using different instruments in different styles. The composers will represent varied time periods in musical history. The artists come from faraway places as well as the Crossroads area. Having attended such as these in the past, I'm confident they will produce some magical and beautiful sounds. On Saturday night, these small groups will come together to perform as part of the large orchestra. It is then that the true majesty of the music will be heard. The sounds of all the disparate instruments and musicians will create a beauty that is more than any one instrument or musician can create by themselves. So it is like life. It is only when we all work together towards a common goal that we can become better than any of us can alone. There are people in this room and people listening who are different in so many ways, and yet we share basic humanity. We need to accept each other for what we have in common rather than what drives us apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisk. So that concludes then item B4, citizen communication. There are no items with public hearings tonight, so we will move into item D, which is a consent agenda. Ms. Hilbert.
Item D1 is the adoption of minutes of a special meeting held on May 14th, 2024, and a regular meeting held on May 21st, 2024. Item D2 is an ordinance amending a variance to Section 14-10B of the City Code for property located at 2804 North Laurent Street, Suite 100 and Suite 200 to allow the sale of alcohol. This item is on second and third reading. Item D3 is a resolution appointing members to the Victoria Health Facilities Development Corporation. Item D4 is a resolution adopting an update to the City of Victoria's financial policies to ensure consistency with certain federal grant program guidelines. Item D5 is a resolution approving an agreement with Texas Tool and Hardware for the installation of replacement doors to the chlorine building at the surface water treatment plant in the amount not to exceed $63,443. Item D6 is a resolution approving the purchase of a disinfection system for water pump station number 3 from Catherine Blakely, DBA Moody Brothers Incorporated, in an amount of $75,825. And item D7 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to accept a grant and execute an interlocal agreement with Golden Crescent Regional Planning Commission for the purchase and support of a Waste Wizard online search tool in the amount of $12,209.44.
Thank you, Ms. Hilbert. Are there any motions with respect to the consent agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
We've got a motion and a second for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, consent agenda is passed. Item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution approving a funding agreement with Victoria Electric Cooperative, or VEC, for LED streetlight conversion project in the amount of $128,435.55.
That agenda item came up quick. So I'm not used to that. So Ken Gill can't be with us this evening. He's at a conference, and Mike's not here either. So I'm covering this topic for this evening. I know I mentioned that Derek would cover public works items, but I love this project, so I want to be talking about it. We intentionally pulled this item from consent because we felt it was a good opportunity to remind you, and also for the benefit of our 2 new council members, to recap this effort, which we have called Light Up Victoria, and we've kind of joked hashtag Light Up Victoria as a thing to try and, from a marketing standpoint, make the point that we're emphasizing on having a better lit community. And I'll talk about the benefits here in a second. But in essence, some of the history, we partner with AEP to convert roughly 4,000 high-pressure sodium lights with new LED street lights. And of course, the goal is to improve public safety, prevent crime, conserve energy, promote economic and community development, and ultimately enhance livability, which of course is our mission. This effort really came to a forefront because when I arrived 5 years ago, and then shortly after Mike and Derek came, we very quickly observed, in trying to kind of focus on community development, that we just had dark areas in our community. And so this became a priority from day one for us. But obviously, it would have been cost prohibitive to do in one go. So we've spread out that expense over a 5-year period. And so this highlights the totality of this effort, which is roughly $1.25 million. The first couple of years, the funding came from the Sales Tax Development Corporation, And then for the current fiscal year that we're in, as well as for the next 2 fiscal years, we're anticipating getting that money from the Utility Debt Capacity Fund. So to coincide with that 5-year funding strategy, we developed 5 phases. And so phase 1, as I started to allude to, we started to replace the high-pressure sodium lights in partnership with AEP. The first phase was only roughly 2,000 and focused on the southern part of our community, and that took place in 2022. Phase 2 was the northern half of our community, and that also was in a partnership with AEP to replace over 2,000 light fixtures. And you can kind of get a sense, I won't go through the weeds of this, but you can get a sense on some of the costs associated with it. You may or may not be aware that the structure for our street lights is that they're technically owned by AEP, and we simply pay for the usage of them. Some communities actually own and maintain streetlights. We do not. It's AEP. So when they're out, we have to report that to AEP. Now, not all light fixtures are created equal, so I'll digress for a second because there are some light fixtures that we are responsible for that typically have stemmed from TxDOT. And so when TxDOT builds projects like on Navarro in the median or on Zach Lentz Parkway, the loop, we are responsible for those. But there aren't, the volume of the lights that we are responsible for don't sort of merit having any specific operation to maintain them. And so typically we outsource some of that work when the need arises. And so the majority of the lights are owned by AEP or owned by VEC. So we'll get to that. And I apologize for digressing there, but I realized halfway through this that it was probably be important to point that out, for folks that may not be familiar with that setup. So phase 3, which is the one that we're actually in right now, and is the agreement on the agenda tonight, is an agreement with Victoria Electric Co-op to convert 159 lights to LED light fixtures. By far, the majority of the lights in our community are owned and maintained by AEP. It's a very, very small percentage that is owned and maintained by Victoria Electric Co-op. Nonetheless, we want to make sure we have a consistent feel around town. And so this is the next step in that effort. This year as well, we've begun the process of assessing where we might have some dark spots. And so we've hired Tenko Lighting to help do what's referred to as a deficiency analysis to help us understand, now that we've replaced all the lights, right, and are beginning to replace all the lights, now we can get a better picture as to, well, where is it still too dark? Because previous to this effort, quite frankly, we just had a lot of lights that were out. And so now that we have lights that are working, it makes sense. Now we can get a sense of where there's still dark areas. Because ultimately, in phases 4 and 5, which is fiscal years 25 and 26, we try and address those areas. And so we know there are some neighborhoods, for example, that don't really have any street lighting at all. They weren't, I think Castle Hills is that way. And so we need to have conversations around what would it take to actually have street lights in some neighborhoods that were never built properly. I shouldn't say that, weren't built with the consideration of street lights to the extent that maybe they should have been. And now we're trying to go back and rectify that. And so anyways, so that's an ongoing process over the next 2 fiscal years. In fiscal year 25 or phase 4, we'll confirm the underlit neighborhoods and develop the plan for it, as well as continuing the effort to improve the existing lights. And so what that looks like in fiscal year 25 is through some tree trimming. You'd be surprised the big difference that it makes to just have properly trimmed trees that surround the light fixtures, and the difference that makes to the way that they light the street or that area. One of the things that was also important to us going through this exercise that we also observed a few years ago was that over the years, for whatever reason, when some lights were put up or some were replaced, it wasn't a consistent feel. So if you drive down Navarro, you drive down Main Street, you might see a light fixture that's 10 feet, you might see one that's 5 feet, you might see one that's 15, it's all over the place. And so we want to make sure that we also take into account the community beautification aspect of this and ensure that the light fixtures all look the same, are the same size, the same length, and help with that consistent look. And so that's an ongoing effort in phase 4. In phase 5, which is fiscal year 26, that's when we'll really, by then, hopefully figure out the plan to actually install the additional lights that need to be installed. And so again, over that 5-year period, we would expend $1.25 million. And the goal is to, as I've mentioned early on, improve public safety, encourage pedestrian mobility, prevent crime, promote community and economic development, conserve energy, because obviously the LED light also produces an energy savings for us, prevent light pollution and enhance livability. So happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. Just super quick recap on this Light Up Victoria effort. And again, the actual agenda item tonight is the agreement with VEC.
One question I had, and Julie, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but if I remember correctly, the development code that we recently did, it has specific requirements that all the lighting does match what we're doing now, correct?
Yeah, since 1992, there has been a standard in the city ordinance that for new subdivisions, subdivision lights have to be placed every 300 feet. Of course, we have so many subdivisions that were developed before 1992.
Right, right, okay, all right, good, thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. Sorry.
Don't apologize.
Looking at that division, the 250K each fiscal year, I see that there's some variance from that. Is the analysis, does the analysis that we did fall under that, or the analysis that we're planning to do regarding the underlit areas and?
You mean the cost of the
cost of that.
analysis? Yeah, I don't remember the cost of the analysis off the top of my head. I'm not sure there's a cost right now, actually. But I'd have to double check that because from my understanding, Tanko Lighting will do the assessment in anticipation of us working with them with the design to actually build out the others. And so oftentimes these companies come in and do these assessments at a minimal charge or free of charge, in hopes that they just get the job later, right? I'd have to confirm that, but my initial instinct is that that's what this structure is.
And I'd assume they're not going to finish that analysis until VEC has completed this process.
Right, they've started it in some parts of our community.
Right,
But, right, yes.
okay, good. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Garza. With that then, I'll accept any motions with respect to item E1.
I move we adopt.
Second.
We've got a motion, a second for item E1. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item E1 passes. Moving on then to action item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution awarding the Pleasant Green Drive Reconstruction Project, which is 1 Lynn to Port Lavaca Drive, to New Stout Excavating Group, Texas, LLC of San Antonio, Texas, in the amount of $949,313.96.
Good evening. Before I begin with the PowerPoint slideshow, I'd like to provide a little background for the two new council members. This project was not originally in the fiscal year 23-24 capital improvements plan, but last fall, the deteriorating condition of that street was, city staff became aware of the deteriorating condition of that segment of Pleasant Green. And at the December council workshop, we presented a flyover video of that street, and council approved that we add this into this year's capital improvements plan. The project will consist of a complete reconstruction of the street down to the subgrade with lime stabilization of the subgrade, a geogrid, limestone base, type B hot mix, and type D hot mix as a surface course. Also, we will be replacing 8-inch water line that runs between Juan Lynn and Delmar. And there's a little bit of 12-inch water line that will be replaced from Delmar to the railroad track. We received 3 bids for this project. New Stout Excavating Group from Texas out of San Antonio provided the low bid of $949,313.96. The other 2 bids were from Clark Construction of Texas and Lester Contracting. Each of those was approximately $1.5 million. Stout Excavating was under the estimate by about $300,000. When these prices were revealed to us, we had some questions. We requested a list of references from the contractor. We called multiple references. Everybody had good things to say. One of the references was a contractor, building contractor out of Quorum, Weaver, and Jacobs, who I'd personally had projects with in the past, and they'd used them for some site work on some projects, and they gave them a glowing recommendation. That kind of thing went a long way for me. And we also asked them to come to Victoria and have a sit-down meeting with us. When we asked them about their prices, how come they were so low compared to the other two bidders? What they said was, in San Antonio, they have to bid aggressive like that to be able to get a project. And we said, well, thank you. We like to see those kinds of numbers. They were also, we had estimated 150 calendar days for construction, but they proposed that they can do it in 109. We asked about that. And actually, the company owner looked at his scheduler and said, well, normally he's the gloom and doom guy. So if he thinks we can do it in that time, we will get it done in that amount of time. The location of this map, of this street section, is between Juan Lynn and Port Lavaca Highway. Proposed schedule on this will be, if we can award this contract to Stout this evening, we would have contracts executed by the end of this month. The contractors proposed a schedule where they would begin work shortly after the 4th of July. And they would expect to be completed by the end of September or early October. Any questions?
No, it's refreshing that we have somebody from out of town.
Yes, sir. It
I
is.
mean, people don't realize sometimes we only have one bid, and it's from in town. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Competitive bids.
You know, we discussed that a couple of months ago on a project that and it's very nice to see some competition in the market. I think it's good for everybody, and that was a refreshing surprise. So, at least to my eyes, anyway. So, any other questions?
No, I move we adopt E2.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second for adoption of item E2. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item E2 passes. Thank you, Mr. Shepard.
Thank you.
As April, oh, you're gonna read it?
I'm going to. You can.
No, go for it. No, go for it.
We'll move on then to item
You
E3.
want to do it? Okay. Item E3 is a resolution appointing a city council member to the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation Board of Directors.
Good evening, Mayor Crocker and council. The resolution before you tonight is to appoint one council member to the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation Board of Directors. The vacancy is due to Mayor Crocker being elected as mayor and sliding over from the council representative position on that board to the mayor position on that board. So that's why it does have to be a council member. The term would actually end at the in December of 2024. Those are 2-year terms, but it's an unexpired term at this point. So it'd just be for a few months, and then of course someone else could be appointed in December, or the person could be reappointed. So just to give you a little background on the term limits of this, the mayor serves for the duration of his term as mayor. And then directors may not serve more than 3 consecutive 2-year terms. And that doesn't matter if they're a council member or a citizen on that board. They're still just served 3 consecutive 2-year terms at the most. And former directors are not eligible to serve again until after abstaining a minimum of 1 year from the date of their term expiration. And directors that are originally appointed to fill a vacancy for a partial term may serve 3 full additional terms if the vacant position has less than 12 months. So this one does have less than 12 months left on it, since it's only 6 months left. So currently we have Russell Dempsey as president, JP Hull as vice president, a citizen representative from Casey Cullen and Sherry McShaffrey, and then Councilmember Lofgren serves. There's a vacancy, and then Mayor Crocker serves on that board. So we're here tonight to appoint one city council member to the board to serve, to fill that vacant position, which again will end in December of 2024. So very short and sweet, but it is a very important board that helps a lot with economic development and works closely with our economic development department as well as city management, so.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hilbert. Any questions?
No, but I'd like to nominate Councilwoman Butler if she would so for the vacant position.
I second it.
You didn't get a chance to accept.
I know, right? This is it.
Well,
That's what we do to the new people.
all right, so we have a motion and a second for
Okay.
Ms. Butler.
Thank you.
Any discussion on that?
Is there any others?
Yep,
Appreciate the nomination.
certainly. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none then, we'll vote on the motion before us. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very well. Ms. Butler, welcome to the Sales Tax Development Corporation Board. All right, moving on then to city manager reports. Mr. Garza.
All right, so we do have a couple this evening, but before I get to that, I do want to follow up on a question we received on an agenda item earlier. By the time I came back to my seat, I had 2 messages, and Allison reached over to convey that the agreement with Tanco is a value of up to $25,000. So there you go. So
That's a
yes,
quick
there's-
follow-up. Well
that's
done.
right. Yeah, I'm impressed. In any case, so the first update that we have this evening is from our chief appraiser, Carrie Wycliffe. I hope I pronounced it right.
Yes.
Yes. Who requested an opportunity to provide an update to you on initiative and project that she's spearheading for the district. So Carrie.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Crocker and council members. So our lease at the Patty Dotson is expiring in January of 2026. We do understand that it's the county's goal to make Patty Dotson a complete health facility. So we have been looking, it's myself, Councilwoman Scott, and then Commissioner Ort have all been working on a building committee to try to find either a structure that we could purchase and remodel, potentially lease to space to lease and remodel, or to build. So this is kind of a synopsis of that and what we have found so far. We are definitely still open to any ideas or suggestions that any of you may have in locations, because as you know, remodel and construction are both highly expensive currently. So right now, what speared all of this was the expiration of our lease coming up in 2026. We know it'll take approximately 12 months to remodel or construct something new. And then, of course, this came on the heels of the IAAO audit that was concluded last year. IAAO said that our recommended staffing needs are 30 personnel. We have 21 currently. However, I am out of office space with 21 people, so we are starting to have to double up. The other issue is boardrooms. So it is our goal to certify our role by July 25th every year, and we currently have 3 boardrooms. One of those boardrooms is someone's office that we have moved them from to be able to host 3 panels in order to take care of it in an efficient time management. So right now, we're leasing approximately 9,500 square feet at the Patty Dodson. Of that space, approximately 8,700 of it is used for offices and storage. We have started digitizing files in hopes that that would alleviate some of the space needs that we're running into, as we learned that nothing's been digitized since 1980. So we are digitizing old property cards, protest files, everything we're required to keep for records management, which is absorbing a lot of space in our current floor plan. So the things that we looked at prior to even considering construction or anything else was that we had looked at leasing space from the county at the Advocate Building. Our biggest concerns there were there was not a full floor that we could occupy. They would split our office in 2 on opposite sides of the building. The major concern for myself is the parking situation. We would have our over 65 disabled persons, veterans, all having to trek a block or more to get to us, and I just didn't feel like that was appropriate. We want to be accessible to our taxpayers for sure. We also looked at leasing space at the old Lax location. Approximately 15,000 square feet is what we're looking at. When I went out to get an estimate for remodel, they told me it'd be $5 million. I nearly fell out of my chair. And the rent on that is looking at $15 a square foot for the office space. And they had said that they would like market rent or 3% year over year, which is going to be hard for us all to budget if we're looking at a market rent situation. So that didn't seem cost effective with the tax dollars that we're using. Third, we looked at leasing space from the UHV North Campus. It would need to be remodeled. They indicated that what they were currently leasing to Parks and Wildlife was anywhere from $17 to $18 a square foot, but they too would look for market rent rates as what they would expect us to pay. The biggest concern there is the space is available now because enrollment is down. However, when enrollment takes off, we are going to be back to looking for a new space. We looked at leasing space at Laurent Tower. We never got any information back from that owner on what their projected cost would be for us to rent anything there. And then we looked at, renting from entities and private individuals. What we had the most response on was private individuals. My biggest concern there is you're talking a triple net lease. The CAD would be paying property tax and insurance and expenses as well. We are tax exempt if we own it. So it just didn't seem like a good use of funds. So this is the initial design that we came up with when we looked at the LAX location. One of the biggest concerns we've had from taxpayers in the past is by having a third panel back in our office area, it puts the ARB near our staff, and we are two separate entities. So we would like the ARB to be separate and more accessible to the taxpayers without having to walk through the inner portion of our office where we do have some confidential documents as well. So we would like the ARB to be separate up front. We'd also like the boardroom to be large enough that we could host our own education, just for the fact that it's more cost effective. It costs us about $10,000 an appraiser to get them trained as an appraiser. And then you have the travel expenses and food and lodging on top of that. So the original cost design for construction came in at $9.5 million from RMA. That's who we got our bid from. They also did our remodel bid. The proposed site would need to be roughly 2 acres, and anything we've looked at so far has been $330,000 to $500,000. Our goal is to, if we're going to construct something, that it is our long-term home. We don't need to relocate. We've relocated twice in the last 40 years, so that would be the goal if we ended up building. So the exterior options, if we chose construction, would be a steel engineered building. We would want to dress up the front that faced the road, but the rest of it would be what's most cost effective in that pre-engineered steel. Again, the goal is to have adequate lobby space for our taxpayers, flexible meeting space. If we hosted education seminars here, since we are the bigger county, other CADs would send their employees to us, which would help offset some of that education budget that we have right now. And then, of course, workspace for 30 employees with room to grow. My goal on 2 acres would be that if we ever had to add space, we would just stay in that location and add and not have to go look for a new building. So all of this, again, stems from our IAAO audit results on how much square footage they said we needed per staff member and that we had already reached capacity. We are beginning to reach those numbers. And again, the number of boardrooms is the problem right now. I could easily run 5 panels every day, but I don't have the space. And Patty Dodson, for the most part, has been very accessible to us. The biggest issue we run into is when there is an election, the only other communal space we could use is used for the election. So you kind of lose that, especially in a year like this year where we've had a lot of elections and still have one to go. So purchasing a building, again, would minimize our need for our staff to travel. It would also reduce the budget burden long-term once we paid off the note to maintenance budget. So again, the sites that I've looked at have been $330,000 to $500,000 plus any closing costs. The construction bid from RMA came in at just around 8.9. We would definitely go out for bids. When we had RMA do it, because we hadn't picked a specific site, we had them include if there was a need for a detention pond, moving of utilities, things like that, the worst case scenario, in the hopes that we don't spend anywhere near that. For the council members that are here, with IAAO, we asked for 150 and we returned a large chunk of that. I am not a believer in spend it because I have it. I like to be cost effective. So there are only 2 groups that actually lend on CAD financing. So tax code 6.051 says that in order for us to build or lease, we must have 3/4 approval from our voting entities. So that's the city, the county, the school districts, and the junior college. And there is very specific needs for our financing. We can't take out a loan ourselves. We have to have a conduit. So 2 groups do that. Government Capital is the most recognized and most used by CADs. This is their loan terms. If we did a 20-year loan, The rate would be 5.99% with an annual payment of $835,856. We do have the option to pay the loan off early at the 10-year mark, so that is nice with no penalties. So then on this slide, what you're looking at is the allocation of levy for both the project and the annual portion of payment. So the city's portion of this project would be right around 1.6 million for the total project with an annual payment of $141,678, which is much more than what we're currently paying. But again, this would just be for the life of this loan. This next one is what it would cost us if we leased and spent $5 million to remodel. The biggest issue with the remodel is we cannot take out the loan for remodel because we don't own it. So we would be at the mercy of the landlord to pay that. And everybody I've spoken to says that the interest rate they would require is prime +1, which is a little stout. That annual lease payment would be $204,356. So if we leased for 7.8 years, we could already pay off the $9.5 million building. The current portion paid by the city annually for our lease is $25,152. So it is an increase, and we understand that. We, again, are happy to take and entertain any ideas and still research. But with the lease expiring in January of '26, we know that it's time to start looking because it's going to take probably 12 months to purchase or remodel anything. Is there any questions?
Yeah, who searched for, did you have a real estate agent search for you, or how did you?
For the vacant lots?
Well, no, for a building or a vacant lot.
Both. We had a realtor and then in-house we looked. So anything we knew that was currently for lease or sell, we had considered. We also had a meeting with all of the entities back in January and kind of put it in the forefront of, we're going to have to move. Does anybody have a space that they would like us to consider or that they know is going to be vacant that we could potentially lease from an entity? Because at the end of the day, leasing from another entity is far more cost effective than it is for me to build or remodel something else. But if at the end of the day there is no space to go, it would be better for the CAD to purchase and remodel a building that they would own at the end of the day or to build new construction.
Any other questions?
Ms. Wycliffe, I'm sorry. I think you mentioned, and I know the answer to this, but for the sake of council, the CAD can't own a building that's bigger than what we need for the purpose of renting it out to make income to offset. Is that correct?
Correct. We could not lease to anyone else to absorb that income.
It's very statutory.
There's a lot of rules.
You might be able to help me with this, Jan, but Region 3 with the move out, will that building be available? Because
the Region 3 on Leary Lane?
yes.
It is available, but it's 40,000 square feet, and so we would have 50% of it as dead space. We had considered or been asked to consider potentially purchasing it in conjunction with another entity. The biggest concern there is access on Leary Lane. It's a very narrow street. It's in between two school zones. And also the parking situation. What do you do with the other 50%? If two entities go in and buy it together, you now have to get two boards to approve any modifications to that property.
Would you have the ability to lease that portion you're not using?
No, I wouldn't be able to lease it out to anyone else for income.
Gotcha. That seems like a very good option versus $10 million, at least in my mind.
Absolutely.
You know, even with limited access and things of that nature, you know, certainly I would think that would be a very good option that, you know, probably needs to be explored a little further. I had another question. Was there a discussion with the county at all, or has there been a discussion about staying where you are and just making your footprint larger, or is the county absolutely saying, no, you're out?
They're not absolutely saying, no, we're out. They've just kind of alluded to the fact that that is their goal long-term and that they would allow us to stay as long as necessary. So yesterday when I spoke at Commissioner's Court, it came up that maybe they would reconsider. I think because, again, the remodel costs and the expense to build is pretty large in this day and age.
Yeah. I
And
would
so-
hope that would be explored a little further.
Right. And so I did have a conversation with one of the commissioners yesterday afternoon, and I know they're brainstorming if they can move tenants that are currently in Patty Dodson to another location, or even, there's probably 1,200 square feet in my office right now that's occupied by old files that I have to digitize before I can destroy. We have started working on that piecemeal with RCI, but I think that was $90,000 was the expense to digitize 100% of everything I needed digitized. And so I have some staff doing it, and then we do have RCI doing some of the files that we feel like can be done in bulk that wouldn't cost as much, so that we could maybe make space in our current space to stay there, or again, try to absorb somebody else's space. So the biggest reason I'm going out is to A, answer questions, B, let everyone know I have to find a new home if we can't work something out with the county, and C, to do any of this, again, requires 3/4 approval by a resolution. So before I just start sending resolutions and saying, hey, can you help us out? I wanted to have the conversation, make myself available to have the conversation as many times as necessary, so that we could hopefully come to something that's cost-effective for us all. Because we know at the end of the day, we're dealing with entity money, which comes from our taxpayers, and we want to be as conscientious as possible with those tax dollars.
What happens
one
if you,
thing-
what happens if you don't get the 3/4 approval?
I
What
can't,
are your options?
I can't move.
We
I
can
have
hold,
to-
hold over tenants.
Yes, we cannot move, lease, construct without 3/4 approval.
And that 3/4 that you're talking about, I know you said city, county, school district, and junior college, but school district is not just one school district. It's a total of 9 entities.
9
correct?
entities, 6 school districts, yes, ma'am.
There are several school districts in the county.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Garza, you were.
Yeah, I was simply just going to add for context, because I'm sure some of you might be thinking it, well, why would the county need the space? And my understanding is that the health department is projecting growing over the next several years as they enhance their operation. They're in the middle of applying for some federal grants that will allow them to increase services that they offer the public. And so that's one of the things that's driving this sort of behind the scenes, is that the health department's looking to expand over the next few years to enhance their service offerings due to grants that they're pursuing. And that's why the space is quote unquote needed by the health department, which is why there's a conversation about trying to relocate some existing tenants.
Right,
And I think that context is important.
yes. Yeah, they're not just kicking us out for the sake of kicking us out,
Right,
but
right, yeah.
they are. And I mean, Parks and Wildlife left last June, and that space was remodeled for another group inside the health department, and they're going to outgrow it very quickly, is what they've now figured out after that remodel, is they're trying to share some communal spaces. So I think it's just the trifecta. We've been there a little over 20 years. We were over off of North Street the 20 years before that, at the existence of the CAD in 1980. So we've been there for a long time. I think at some point we knew we were probably going to have to relocate. We just hoped it wasn't in the peak of supply prices and inflation.
Our whole procedure in doing this and relocating is all laid out in state law, and it's very structured. And again, we need, ultimately, we would need the votes of 3/4 of those particular entities. And part of the reason that we're doing these discussions is because if there doesn't seem to be that support, then Ms. Whitcliffe can be doing other things with her time, and we can be, trying to figure out what we can do, but we can't move without the approval. And so certainly, council would be involved at least until that point. And there's also some strict timelines on when she does ask for the resolution of support. It's just all, there are lots of rules.
Well, I will say that I'm glad to hear that there's continuing discussions with the county, because obviously $10 million of taxpayer money is $10 million of taxpayer money that we could all put to other uses if there is a viable solution. Certainly, I would hope that the county will do all it can to look at that, either in that building, in the Advocate building, and see if we can come up with something that's short of what this burden's going to do. Have you talked with the school board yet?
I have spoken, well, I haven't done the school board meeting. I have spoken with the interim superintendent as well. He and I kind of kicked around some potential locations. The ones that we looked at, the biggest problem is there's 64 parking spots. If I'm going to have 30 employees and I currently have 10 ARB members, I see 160 taxpayers a day in my office during protest season. So again, the parking issue was a concern there. The other reason we're kind of out talking to the entities is if you know of a building we haven't thought of, we're happy to consider it, because I only know what I know, and a lot of real estate transactions happen by word of mouth. You just know somebody's looking to sell it before it ever hits the market, and those are conversations we're interested in having, because again, we want to be as effective as we can be with our budget.
Gotcha. Well, if the county isn't truly kicking you out, it's going to be hard for me to say, yeah, sure, let's go spend 10 million. So,
Right.
So let's
Agreed.
keep those discussions going and let me know if I can in any way help or facilitate that. I'm more than happy.
Is the county kicking the groundwater district out or the elections department out?
No, but they are county entities, so
Yeah, but they could go in the Advocate building.
the elections
think-
office cannot go in the advocate building due to the fact that there are elected officials officing in the advocate building. I
But the
believe
grant-
Mr. Cloud is there, Ms. Colkhurst is there, and I know Jeannie Morris had an office there, so I don't know if that office will remain or not.
And I think you heard Carrie mention that the county's looking at reshuffling office locations. That's part of that. So what offices that are currently there, what if they could be relocated to the old Advocate in
Right,
order
exactly.
to create
Right.
capacity there?
Exactly.
So there's certainly, and I had my meeting with the county judge today, and I certainly walked away from that related to this topic, understanding that they're fully exploring all avenues and all options to try and keep the appraisal district in some county property, because keep in mind that from the county perspective, and I hadn't thought about this until the judge pointed it out, is that it's a double whammy impact for them. Because not only would they be on the hook for financially contributing towards a new building, but they lose the revenue
Right, true.
that they're getting from the appraisal district, since it is a separate entity and not just the department.
Right.
And so it behooves them to ensure that they do everything they can to explore options. And I certainly walked away feeling like they certainly are doing that.
No, the county has been very helpful in making us reassured that we're not kicking you out. We just got to find a solution. And we've been working with them again since the fall to try to come up with some kind of a solution as well with the county property. So,
Very good. Well, thank you for your efforts, and we'll encourage you to keep them going.
yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, so our next city manager's report is from our very own Julie Fulgham, who will present the CDBG 2024 Annual Action Plan proposed budget and funding recommendations.
Good evening. So it's that time of year. So just as a reminder, of course, this is a city manager report. So this is our recommendation to present to council so we can get some feedback, because we have to spend the rest of the summer actually drafting the plan and getting it ready to submit to HUD for final approval. So this is the 2024 Annual Action Plan, which coincides with our fiscal year 25. Federal government always makes it easy on us. It is the last annual action plan out of our 2020 to 2024 consolidated plan, which is our 5-year plan. So next year, we'll be doing a lot of public input and outreach to draft our new consolidated plan. So also a little bit of a history lesson is that we are celebrating 50 years of the CDBG program. Of course, the city of Victoria has not been an entitlement city for all of those 50 years. We became an entitlement city in 1990. We became entitled to receive the grant in 1990 with the 1990 census. So to become an entitlement city, you have to have a population threshold of 50,000, which we hit in that 1990 census. And so by the time the paperwork all got signed, it was about 1992, 1993 that we received our first CDBG grant.
Really, previous to that, it'd go to the county, or no?
No.
Or nobody would get it?
No, nobody in our community received it.
Got it.
The community, there's different rules for the counties. So for city, it's 50,000. And I'm not really well versed on what those county rules are because I've never worked for a county. So what is CDBG? It is, of course, a community development block grant. It's an annual grant from HUD to assist in the development of viable communities. The purpose is to reduce poverty and its effects, and by providing quality housing, creating a suitable living environment, and expanding economic opportunities. And of course, these funds all have to meet national objectives, which is helping low to moderate income individuals. So every year we have this timeline. So these are the specific dates for this year. Of course, next year will be different because, as I mentioned, it will be our 5-year plan. But then all of the annual action plans that follow the 5-year plan every 5 years follows this rough timeline. Then in March we have a pre-application workshop. Then we open up a request to intent to funding application where entities submit that form, and we can talk to them and get an idea of what their program is, so that make sure that their program can meet the national objectives. Because, as you know, these are it's federal money, so there are a lot of rules. We have to follow all of the Code of Federal Regulations as it pertains to funding out these funds, and so we want to make everyone's application as viable as possible. So then and that intent to request funding gives us that, opens that dialogue with the different agencies for us. Then we open the application. They have a month to complete it, and then we do the review and come to council always the first meeting in June to let you know our funding recommendations. And if we get a head nod, then we go to work of actually writing the annual action plan, which is scheduled to be approved by you on August 6th of this year, and we have a statutory deadline of August 16th to submit to HUD. And these funds are then able to be expended after October 1st, so it runs next fiscal year. So our funding did decrease a little bit. I mentioned the 90s. Those were the good old days when we got $2 or $3 million, so it was really easy to fund women's shelters and whatnot. And unfortunately, over the last decade or so, we've seen our funding kind of stay at this $500,000 mark. So we received $551,333. Our administration is 20%. Of course, that state pays for staff, and then all the administration required of the grant. For our demolition program, we are allocating $25,000, which is lower than what we normally do, but we still have some unexpended funds in previous grant years to make our overall demo budget healthy. This year we are proposing a parks project, which is adding solar lighting and sidewalks at 3 parks, Bronson, Pine, and Meadow Lane parks, for a total cost of $95,000. And then public facilities and public services. And as a reminder, those public service activities are capped at 15% by HUD. So this is what it looks like to be low to moderate income in our community. Of course, this is a sliding scale based on the number of people in a household. 100% median family income for a family of 4 is $88,300. And these limits went into effect May 1st. So the recommended funding for public facilities, so this part is not capped, and this is where we use usually infrastructure type projects, things that have a really lasting impact. For our Boys and Girls Club, they are proposing a complete re-roof of their facility for $57,600. Home of Joseph, which is a new youth group home, they requested a funding of $30,000. We are recommending only $15,000. Their original request included a gate for security, lighting, landscaping, and gutters, and we are only proposing to pay the security portion of that request and not pay for the landscaping or gutter work. The Hospice of South Texas wants to develop a laundry room. My mind was kind of blown when they told us that they actually don't have a laundry facility on site. They have to send everything out, and that really impacts their operations. So their original request was for $20,465. But we're only proposing to fund $15,500 because part of that original request included the actual laundry machines, and that's considered an asset for CDBG funding, which we don't really have the capacity to track assets outside of the City of Victoria organization. So that reduction is the entire cost of building the room out minus the actual equipment. Meals on Wheels is proposing a parking lot and exterior lighting for $15,000. Midcoast Family Services, you heard Jeannie speak on what their proposal is, and that's for $99,907. And that also does not, even though it's a kitchen facility and laundry facility, it's just to get the structure there. It does not include any kitchen appliances or laundry appliances. The Salvation Army is also proposing a kitchen expansion. They requested $60,000, but we reduced it down to $35,000 because we eliminated the kitchen appliances in that proposal. So the room will be ready for them to purchase appliances with other type of funding, because again, those are all assets. And then the YMCA child care playground. They requested $62,000, and we are not recommending funding them because a playground is an asset. And so we've been very clear with all of the entities that just funding assets is not something in our capacity, because we have to track the way the grant makes us track those assets for the life of the asset and that ongoing paperwork that's required year over year.
Could you go over a couple of things before you leave that slide for me, please?
Speak into the mic, please.
Yes. The acronyms MOW and LMI.
Meals on Wheels is MOW, and LMI is low to moderate income individuals.
Thank you.
So one question too. So when you say like the playground is an asset, so help me out, because I'm looking at, if we're adding a laundry room, I mean, is that part of a building we're actually adding onto the building, and that's not considered an asset?
No, creating the room and doing the electrical and the plumbing and adding the flooring.
So we're just improving existing structure?
Right.
Got it, okay.
And structures actually aren't considered assets that we have to track. Assets are playgrounds.
Would be the washer and the dryer.
Washer, dryers.
Yeah.
The actual appliances are considered assets for the grant. So yeah, if it was a room remodel, we could easily fund that, and we have actually funded those in the past. So these are the public service activities where we receive a very large amount of requests, and unfortunately, we are capped at that 15%, so we only have 80-something thousand each year to grant out. But we could spend all $500,000 on these activities, and they're very important to our community. Just the way the HUD rules are, we unfortunately have to spread that sort of thin. So Billy T. Catan has the behavioral intervention program. We are recommending $5,000. The Boys and Girls Club after school summer camp is recommended at $8,000. Our Community Action Committee for our rental assistance program, we are recommending $16,500. They also have a senior care services program. We are not recommending funding that this year because we talked to them and the need for rental assistance was so much higher that rather than splitting rental assistance and having all that money spent in just 1 or 2 months, we funded both of their programs into the rental assistance after a discussion with them. The Food Bank Meals on Wheels, the Food Bank Kids Backpack Program is recommended at $10,000. Golden Crescent CASA, Volunteer for Every Child in Need, for their training and counseling and all of their activities at $8,000, and then Gulf Bend Wellness Community at $10,000. And there's another slide, so I'll entertain any questions on these activities.
Who owns the Boys and Girls Club?
I believe the school district.
No, well.
The latest
We're
email.
not sure, are we? I'm just
The
curious.
Boys and Girls Club is its own entity.
Yes.
But who owns the land that it's on?
Yeah. So we're still trying to clean that up.
Okay, so you don't have an answer?
No, there's conflicting information on that front.
Okay.
So the rest of the public service activities, Meals on Wheels, home delivered program was $5,000. Melanated Mamas of Golden Crescent for scholarship, we are not recommending funding them. They are a very brand new organization, and the requirements for the grant is that they have the cash on hand for the amount that they are being granted, because this is a reimbursable grant, so they have to spend all of the funds and then get reimbursed. And so part of the application process is that all of these entities have to submit their financials with us, and so they did not have enough funds to cover the grant activity that they were proposing. So we do not recommend this year, but hopefully when I say they're brand new, I think they're like 3 or 4 months in existence. So hopefully next year they'll have been successful at fundraising and be eligible to apply. Our Lady of Victory, St. Vincent de Paul Society is running a utility assistance program at $5,000. The Salvation Army, a community transit and taxi assistance program for $5,000. United Way of the Crossroads Community Connections Project at $5,000, and then VISD Kids Connection is back, and we're recommending $5,000 for them. So you can see the requests were very large. We had a lot of entities request this year, more so than we've had in the last couple of years, some that have come back that had fallen off for a few years. And so our requested amount of funding was $243,300, but we are limited to the 15% max by HUD, so we can only grant out $82,699, and so this proposal is to grant out $82,500.
I have a question because I'm not sure how this all fits together. You made a comment about rental assistance.
Yes.
That's a different part of the grant?
No, that is part of a public service activity. So the Community Action Committee is proposing to run a rental assistance program, and we've recommended funding it at $16,500.
Thank you.
So if council is in agreement with this proposal, then we'll go back to our office and start writing the annual action plan. It takes pretty much all summer. Our public comment period, we'll have a draft published July 5th for the public comment period, although it will be a rough draft at that point. And then we are proposing council approve it for August 6th and then submit to HUD by no later than August 16th, 2024.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
In looking at this, trying to understand, public safety services is something that's listed as eligible for this type of grant funding. Is there any proposed allocation in the entitlement piece of it that maybe we're missing, or I'm missing, where something would be utilized for equipment or something of that nature?
I'll have to go into to look at the specifics when it comes to public safety or so public safety can be like lighting and whatnot. Are you talking about for police and fire?
Specifically, fire equipment is listed as something that can be utilized through this grant. So I'm just curious if, in addition to those awards that we're looking at, if there's if it's allocated in one of the different areas in the budget where we would look at potentially fire equipment as being something that we would utilize this grant for.
Those funds are generally come from the general fund, and this funding is meant more. It is generally been allocated more by council to grant out to different partners to help LMI individuals. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Fogel. So then I believe that concludes city manager's reports.
Yes, sir.
And I understand that we will have an executive session.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Well, then we will take a 10-minute break and then adjourn into, or we will take a 10-minute break and we'll reconvene in executive session.
The City Council will recess for executive session on the 4th day of June 2024 at 6:13 p.m. Subject matter is as follows: Texas Government Code 551.087, 551.071, and 551.072.